Morning, Prime Minister.
Morning.
In times of desperation, searching for reconciliation to fend off one nation.
What about getting the coalition back together, do you think?
Oh, that's where we need divine intervention.
Were you hoping for forgiveness in there today?
Nothing to be forgiven for.
An embattled opposition leader seeking a lasting solution to the former coalition's divisions.
Do not work for the food that perishes, but for the food that endures for eternal life.
With Liberals and Nationals still contesting the terms of a potential reunion, the government had plenty to gloat about as it cut the number of opposition questions in question time to 1 in 4.
When the member for New England moved to the crossbench, it had not occurred to us at the time that the entire National Party was going to move to the crossbench with him. And while he's not their leader, they appear to be his followers.
The only cost of living issue they're interested in talking about is the cost of living with each other. That's what they're interested in, Mr Speaker.
We see the coalition again. Well, I'm so sorry. You're the Liberal Party, I apologise. Forget that you're not the coalition. No coalition.
Seeing as the crossbench is now as big as the Liberal Party and likely to soon exceed them with more defections, on what basis are the Libs still regarded as the opposition and enjoying the perks that go with it?
Despite the political rights fissures, Susan Lee and David Littleproud were on their best behaviour, careful to avoid another bout of negative headlines today, which was always going to be about the Reserve Bank of Australia, its decision to hike the official cash rate and the degree to which the government should wear the blame.
The Prime Minister took credit for rate cuts last year. Will he now take responsibility for the rate rise today?
We've acknowledged, certainly, that many Australians are doing it tough.
Today's rate hike ends one of the shortest Reserve Bank easing cycles in its modern history. And with inflation forecast to stay above the middle of the Reserve Bank's 2 to 3% target range for years, there may be more interest rate pain to come.
I know this is not the news that Australians with mortgages want to hear, but it is the right thing for the economy.
I think that the RBA are pretty scared here. I think that they're really worried about the fact that inflation is well above where they need it to be, and that suggests to me more than one rate hike.
The government insists that it's not to blame and that the increase in inflation is driven by stronger business and private sector spending. The central bank governor faced a barrage of questions about whether fiscal policy, state and federal government spending, in other words, is part of the problem.
I'm not going to comment on fiscal policy because it's an independent policy. Governments have to supply services, they have to supply goods to people, they have to build infrastructure, they have to make those policy decisions. We take that as given and, together with private demand, look at whether or not it means that inflation is going to be under pressure, upward pressure or not. That's our focus.
In areas where it's competing with the private sector, such as perhaps construction, they're using the same labour, steel, cement, as people in the private sector would be using, then it could probably be considered to be contributing to inflation because essentially it's just adding demand in there, it's causing prices to be bid up.
Concerningly, the Reserve Bank is saying that inflation is once again rearing its head at the same time that economic growth is set to weaken.
It's not taken much of a pickup in demand to generate price pressures. Years of weak to no productivity growth is a big part of that story.
While much of the political heat is aimed at the government over today's decision, the Reserve Bank faced its own dose of criticism from those who said it cut rates too eagerly last year.
I would only say that I would take you back to the first half of last year and what we were facing into. And the market was expecting 3 rate cuts. Domestic demand was soggy, inflation was coming back, it was in the band, everything was in line. So I think you've got to think, I think we were doing the right thing.
Arguably, we didn't need that August cut. However, I have to say that looking at the economy as we saw it back then, there wasn't a lot of evidence to suggest that that's what would happen.
The Reserve Bank's course reversal has made Australia an outlier among advanced economies, something the opposition leader was only too happy to emphasise.
2 years ago, Australia had lower interest rates than the US, the UK, Canada, New Zealand and the euro area. Today, after this rate increase, Australia will have higher interest rates than all of them.
There's a number of reasons why you might think that inflation is coming from overseas events. The tariffs, for example, trade barriers have been put up all around the place. But most of this is actually coming from domestic sources. We can see that quite clearly in the data. This is not an international problem.
For the Treasurer, today's news has upended his post-election expectation that Labor's second term would be less dominated by inflation worries. But with price pressures back on the rise, the coming May budget will be judged on how well it helps fix the problem.
I actually would say that I think, at least what I've heard the Treasurer say, is that he is focused on inflation. It's his number one thing he's focusing on at the moment. So I think he's conscious of it. But I think we can work. I think the idea that somehow we work hand in glove is not the way these things work. We are independent, they are independent, and we work with what we've got.
Ted O'Brien is the Deputy Leader of the Opposition and the Shadow Treasurer. He joined me earlier. Ted O'Brien, welcome.
Thanks very much, Sarah. Great to be with you.
Just before we get to today's Reserve Bank decision, has there been any progress in the reconciliation talks with the Nationals?
Well, actually, before we get to any of that, maybe I should say happy 40th birthday.
Thank you.
Look, in terms of the discussions with the National Party, they've been very cordial. They've been taking place in good faith, very constructive. As I hope you might understand, I won't go through the details today. They're discussions we're having in confidence, but it's great to be having those discussions with them.
But just to be clear, are the Nationals at all receptive to Susan Lee's condition that the 3 senators whose resignations she accepted be benched for 6 months? How did that go down?
Oh, there's more discussions we need to have, Sarah, and so we'll wait and see. It's not for me to speak on behalf of the National Party, as you know, and I don't want to preempt anything, so I want to honour the goodwill that conversation has already begun in, and we'll see what develops over the next day or two.
I asked your Nationals colleague this last night. What do you think the voters make of this chaos in the coalition?
Oh, I think there's no doubt the voters want to ensure that we have a stable opposition, an effective opposition. There's just no doubt about that, and I can't pretend otherwise. Whether that opposition is ultimately from the Liberal Party holding the government to account, or a reunited Liberal National Party, well, let's wait and see. We don't know the answer to that. But, the better the opposition is, the better the government is. And one thing's for sure, this country needs a better government, and so we need to ensure we offer a very effective opposition, and time will tell whether that's just the Liberal Party or we're back with the National Party.
Does that mean that you are open to the idea of it just being the Liberal Party?
Well, Australia, I think, is best served by a coalition, but if at the end of the day that's not to be, then I have enormous confidence in the depth of talent within the Liberal Party, and yes, I do believe we can absolutely hold what is a very poor government to account.
Did the Reserve Bank make the right decision today, raising interest rates?
Well, I don't think the Reserve Bank probably had any other choice, and that is what I've heard from some of the leading economists now for a long time, because of the spending of the Albanese government. It is out of control. This is the highest spending government in 40 years, which meant the Reserve Bank really had no choice, because the economy right now it's operating at its speed limit, its cap. And the more the government keeps pouring money into the economy, you see that supply isn't enough to meet demand. Prices go up, inflation therefore up, interest rates therefore eventuate. So the more the government pours money into the economy, we're at a point now where the Reserve Bank has no choice but to take money out of the economy. The way it does that is it has to increase interest rates. It all comes back to the Albanese government spending spree.
Just one point today. The Reserve Bank Governor made clear both in the statement and in the questions that she was asked in the press conference that it was in fact the principal driver today was private demand, not government spending. Do you accept what she said about that the principal driver is private demand at the moment?
Sarah, I did listen to Michelle Bullock's press conference, and contrary to what the Treasurer was telling the Parliament in question time, she made it very clear that both public and private demand was an issue. And so she did not dismiss the importance of public demand, that basically you see both public, so government spending, public demand and private, butting up against the speed limit of the economy. And that is why you see the RBA making the decision today, because the government can't control its own spending.
I'll let the Treasurer rebut you if he wants to on the issue of private demand. But let me ask you a different question. You are asserting that this is an issue that is most clearly related to spending by the government. Where would you therefore prioritise savings to reverse the trend that you've described?
Well, it's up to the government to find room in its own budget. When I said before, Sarah, about Australian families, if you think what a family does at home, if you want your children to now do other extracurricular things, do the sporting clubs and whatnot, and you don't have the money to do it, you find savings elsewhere. You might do fewer takeouts and whatnot. That's the way a family runs its budget.
Yeah, so we understand, we do understand the consequences, but if I can bring you back to that question, where would you prioritise savings to reverse the trend that you are identifying today as the principal cause of this inflation and interest rate rise?
Discretionary spending, not
where,
pressures.
Where
specifically? So there's two types. There's pressures, so health, education, NDIS, social welfare. The Coalition previously, and now the Liberal Party, has never criticised government in that regard. Where our criticism lies is they make discretionary spending decisions. So in this year alone, they are planning to spend $50 billion of discretionary money. Now, they have every right to decide their spending priorities, Sarah. But with that right comes a responsibility to find savings in their budget. The way it shouldn't work is government can go and spend on whatever their priorities are, and it's the job of the opposition to go and find room in the government's budget.
But I think it's time, I think people want to hear how you're going to arrest the current trend. If it's not going to be in those major spending areas in the budget, where is the change coming from? What have you identified as specifically wasteful?
We will certainly have different priorities, and you will see that as we start unfolding our policies. Obviously, we haven't done a lot of that. We've made some of our policies clear. For example, we've been very clear on energy policy. And so there are aspects of the government's budget which deals with, electric vehicles, fringe benefits taxes.
I'm going to stop you there because that is, as you know, not a significant amount of money for shifting a trend in the kind of increase in GDP spending that you're referring to. So let's not go back to the EV tax, if I may ask you.
Well, Sarah, with all due respect, I didn't say that's the single silver bullet, but I'm giving you a clear example. Now, that is worth $4 billion. It might mean nothing to the Labor Party, there's no doubt about that, but $4 billion is a lot of money. These are the sorts of things we've been very open about. The Net Zero Authority, more money. So where we start coming out with policies, you'll see we have different priorities. But the problem is this: the government has no discipline. It has no rules to contain the Treasurer's spending. This is the first Treasurer since Peter Costello with no rules about how to control spending. And this is the problem. They keep spending, but they don't find saves. Even as an opposition, the Liberal Party has already driven discipline within our own team. So if a shadow minister wants to come forward with new spending programs, they have to find savings so that it can be offset. This is a basic discipline of financial management. And it's a discipline that this government still has not learnt, despite being in government now for 4 years.
Ted O'Brien, on this significant day, I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you very much, Sarah.
Thank you. The Treasurer, Jim Chalmers, joins me now from Canberra. Treasurer, welcome.
Thanks, Sarah.
You were so confident in your ability to manage the economy in a way to keep interest rates down. What went wrong?
Well, what we've seen in recent inflation data is that it's come in not that much higher than we were expecting, but higher than we would like. We've been upfront about that. We know that people are under pressure, and this interest rate decision today will put people under more pressure. We acknowledge that too. But more than acknowledge that, we're acting on it. We're rolling out cost of living help. We're cutting income taxes 2 more times this year and next year. And we're managing the budget in a much more responsible way, in a way that is unrecognisable to our predecessors who left us higher and rising inflation, an absolute mess in the budget, and we've spent 3.5 years making some progress, but there's more work to do.
There were plenty of words in that sentence, Jim Chalmers, but I didn't hear an answer to the question about what went wrong. You were confident previously in your ability to manage the economy, that it was thanks to you that interest rates were down, thanks to your management of the economy. What went wrong? Why are we where we are today?
Well, I think, as I said in my first answer, Sarah, what we've seen in the last couple of inflation data releases, it's come in higher than we would like. That's been the shift in the Reserve Bank's thinking, obviously, judging by their statements today when they said that they've been surprised on the upside by private demand in our economy. And that has changed their forecast and it's changed their thinking about the economy. So that's the thing that has changed. But I also want to say, Sarah, that when you talk about our economy more broadly, we're still talking about inflation much lower than it was in 2022, still higher than we would like, but we've got very low unemployment. We've got strongly recovering business investment. We've got near record high participation. We've got solid growth in our economy. And as the Reserve Bank Governor said today, we've actually got a lot going for us. At the same time, we do have to pay more attention to this inflation challenge. The Reserve Bank has made this decision today. We understand that it will make things harder for people. We understand that the government has more work to do as well, helping to address this inflation challenge.
But are you claiming that there is nothing you could have done on the spending side to help this fight against inflation to not arrive at the point that we've arrived at today?
Well, the point that I'm making is the same point or a similar point that Governor Bullock was making today, and that is that private demand has recovered much more quickly. That's the reason for this upward pressure on the outlook. If you look at the story of the economy over the last year or so, it's actually a story of public demand and public spending retreating and private demand taking its place and growing faster than anticipated. Certainly in the most recent national accounts data, we saw a huge recovery in business investment. We've seen a recovery in consumption and in other areas as well. And so I acknowledge that we've got a very substantial inflation challenge in our economy. I've been upfront about that. The budget is not the primary determinant of prices in our economy, but governments can and should play a helpful role, and that's our focus.
Now, you are insisting, as you did in Parliament today, on this being about private demand, but aren't you contributing to that private demand through the billions of dollars in cost of living relief, tax relief, debt relief? Isn't that money flowing into our pockets and out again, contributing to that private demand?
Well, first of all, I've heard you describe it in a similar way that Jake Grieber did a moment ago, as this is my opinion. I'm referring to the media release put out by the Independent Reserve Bank. I'm referring to the Statement on Monetary Policy, and I'm referring to some of the comments that Governor Bullock made about private demand in our economy. It shouldn't be especially contentious for me to repeat that view. Now, when it comes to the budget position, we're talking about a government which has very substantially repaired the budget, including in the most recent mid-year budget update. We found $20 billion in savings. We improved the budget bottom line in every year. We got the debt down in every year of the forward estimates as well. It's actually the most responsible mid-year budget update on record, and it's part of us finding $114 billion in savings, delivering 2 surpluses, getting the other deficits down, getting the Liberal debt down by $176 billion, helping to engineer the biggest nominal improvement in the budget in 3 years in the history of the Commonwealth, something like $233 billion in total. And so we have made a heap of progress on the budget. We've got real spending growth down. We've got spending as a share of the economy down as well. Ted O'Brien lied to your viewers a moment ago when he said that we were the highest spending government. The highest spending government was the Morrison government, just like the highest taxing government was the Howard government.
During COVID.
He didn't say that. He didn't say that, Sarah, and he deliberately left that out. But the reason that that's relevant is because when we came to office and we had inflation above 6% and galloping, and we had all these deficits, and we had the $1 trillion in Liberal debt, spending almost a third of the economy, and real spending growth much quicker than what it is now. We've made a lot of progress getting on top of that, but we know that there's more work to do, and that'll be a big focus of the budget in May.
Now, you are quoting the Reserve Bank Governor, but you've actually spent the day quoting the Reserve Bank Governor on private demand, so you want people's focus. That's your political answer today. You want people to focus on what she said.
It's an economic answer, Sarah. It's not a political answer, it's an economic answer. It reflects the reality of the last year of our economy, public demand in retreat, private demand taking its place. A factual point made by the Reserve Bank Governor today.
Yes, but my question previously was whether or not you acknowledge that the amount of money that you have pumped into the economy via cost of living relief, debt relief, tax relief has contributed to that private demand and the state that it's in, which has led to the decision made by the Reserve Bank today.
Yeah, and my answer to that, Sarah, was to point out all of the ways that we're improving the budget. Yes, we're rolling out cost of living relief, but we're doing that at a time when we're delivering a couple of surpluses and smaller deficits and getting the debt down. And in that mid-year budget update, released not even 2 months ago, $20 billion in savings. Ted O'Brien couldn't nominate one saving. We found more savings in that one mid-year budget update than our predecessors managed in their last 7 updates. And so we're managing the budget responsibly, we're managing the economy responsibly. Of course, we're very focused on this inflation challenge, just as we're focused on turning around a couple of decades of poor productivity performance around and making our economy more resilient in the face of all of this global economic uncertainty. Those are our 3 priorities, and you'll see them reflected in the budget in May.
What hope can you offer those people whose mortgages are going up as their wages fail to keep price with inflation?
Well, first of all, we've had 2 years of real wages growth. Real wages were plummeting when we came to office. We've turned that around, but obviously when you've got inflation higher than you'd like, that has implications for real wages. We're upfront about that as well, but 2 years of relatively strong real wages growth. I'd say to people who are thinking about the next year or two, they will get a tax cut from this Labor government that our political opponents didn't want them to get. And we know that those top-up tax cuts are all about helping people with the cost of living so that they can, when they earn more, they can keep more of what they earn. Our record on wages, the gender pay gap and the like has been much, much stronger than the record of the government that we replaced, and that's because we know that decent wages are part of the solution to the cost of living pressures, not part of the problem.
Just briefly, are you worried that this return of inflation will scare voters to the fringes?
I'm not seeing things through a political lens, Sarah. I've got a big economic job to do. I take responsibility.
It's more a societal question, Treasurer, if I may. It's not so much a purely political question. It's really a societal question.
Well, I think if you want to go to that, Sarah, I mean, my view is that the kind of division and divisiveness which is peddled by the 3 parties of the political right in Australia is anathema to economic progress. I think it makes it harder to deal with these big economic challenges when you've got 3 political parties in this kind of unedifying auction to be the most divisive force in our politics. And that's why we take seriously our responsibilities as a party which works through these issues and a government who works through these issues in a considered, methodical way. We know that there are big challenges in our economy. We also know we've got big opportunities and big advantages as a country, and we intend to maximise those advantages, deal with the challenges together, and to do them in a calm and considered way.
Treasurer, thank you very much indeed for joining us.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.